The century-old house that I called home lay crushed beneath the merciless treads of the HOA's bulldozer. They called it a community architectural violation, but to me, it was 3 generations under one roof, the place I was born and the last legacy my mother left behind. There was no warning, no chance to repair, just a violation notice, and 17 minutes later, everything was gone. But what Victoria Blackwood, the HOA president, didn't know was that her entire 2,000-head cattle ranch relied on water pipes running straight through my land. I didn't argue, didn't sue, I just turned a valve. And you know what? Right now I'm holding something that in 8 hours will force that woman to her knees, tears streaming, begging for forgiveness. Go ahead, comment where you're watching from, because this is just the beginning. I was sitting in what used to be my mother's sewing room, folding her hand-embroidered handkerchiefs into a memory box when the ground started vibrating. At first, I thought it was construction from the highway project 2 miles away. But then it grew stronger, more deliberate. Mechanical thunder rolling straight to my front door. I set down the last handkerchief Mom made before the cancer took her, walked to the window and saw a massive yellow bulldozer crawling up to my property line. Its diesel engine sounded like a prehistoric beast, ready to eat everything in its path. Behind it stood Victoria clipboard in one hand, an official document in the other, flanked by board members, county inspectors, and a cop who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Victoria smiled, the kind of smile you'd see on a shark right before it bites you in half. "Mr. Thornfield," she called out, her voice carrying like a town crier. "Your property has been deemed an immediate safety hazard to the community." This structure, she gestured at the house that had survived the Dust Bowl tornadoes. Everything violates multiple architectural standards and poses an imminent threat. I stared at her, trying to process. The house my grandfather built, where I learned to walk, where my parents brought me home, now somehow a threat. She handed me a report, engineering stamps, technical diagrams, but something was off. The HOA logo was wrong, the watermark weird, and the photo used as evidence wasn't even my house. I'd seen it before from a condemned building in another town. "This report is fake," I said, barely above a whisper. Victoria's shark smile never faded. "Personal emotions can't stand in the way of community safety. The decision is final." The bulldozer operator climbed into his cab. Old Pete Thompson, 3 doors down, dragged his rocking chair out and settled in like he was about to watch a Shakespeare tragedy unfold. "You can't just demolish someone's house," I protested. But it was too late. The bulldozer roared to life and my mother's handkerchief crumpled in my fist. Mom used to say, "Sometimes you have to lose what you love most to find your real strength." She was right. In 17 minutes, a century of family history. The porch where we watched sunsets, the kitchen where Grandma made her apple pie, turned to rubble. Victoria turned to leave, not a word of regret, her entourage trailing behind her. I stood in the ruins, a wasteland of broken wood, twisted metal, shattered memories, and then I smiled. She had no idea what she'd just done. That night I sat by Mom's grave like I had every night since the funeral. "They think they won, Mom, but you always said the Thornfield family keeps its most important secrets underground." Walking back to the empty lot, I made a decision. Instead of driving to the motel, I headed for the one thing they hadn't touched, the old root cellar hidden behind a thicket of oak trees. My great-grandfather dug that cellar in 1924, back when a hard winter could wipe out a whole family. Inside, buried under decades of dust, I found the blueprints for the original water system, not just lines and numbers, but a map of power. Every ranch, every house, every new development around here was hooked up to water that ran through pipes controlled by my family. Tucked with those blueprints was a legal document, perpetual water rights, dated and signed in 1924, airtight and ironclad. You know what I mean when I say I suddenly understood leverage. I called Marcus Rivera, the only property rights lawyer in town. We went to high school together, and he was at Mom's funeral. "Marcus, is it possible water rights from the 1920s still stand?" He paused. "In this state, old water rights often trump everything that came later. You might be sitting on gold." After I hung up, I walked back out to the empty yard, hand resting on the heavy brass valve hidden 20 feet from where my kitchen used to be. That valve controlled 60% of the community's water, including every drop Victoria's ranch needed. But I waited. Mom always said, "Gather facts before you move." That's when Victoria sent the first text. We understand you're grieving, but spreading lies about the HOA won't help anyone. Maybe you should seek professional help. Classic psychological warfare. I smiled. She was scared. A couple of days later, I threw a memorial for Mom right on the empty lot. I invited the whole town, put historical contributions of the Thornfield family on the invitation. By noon, 40 neighbors showed up. Pete brought cornbread. Mrs. Chen from the hardware store loaned tables. Even Sarah Chen, the investigative reporter, came by. We laughed, we remembered, and I let slip that our family built the water system. Water is life, I said, and the ground beneath us practically hummed with the truth. Victoria showed up, legal threats ready. But when I offered her cornbread, the crowd shifted. They saw the difference between someone protecting a legacy and someone throwing their weight around. After the last chair was packed, Marcus pulled me aside. Victoria just hired Blackstone PR. She's going on the attack. I told him, sometimes you have to get dirty to plant something beautiful. As the sun set, I walked out to the valve chamber. I didn't turn the wheel yet, but I knew for the first time since Mom died I had the upper hand. Monday morning, a courier dropped off a cease and desist from Victoria's big city lawyer. Stop talking about water rights or get sued into the Stone Age. The accusations were wild emotional distress, defamation, conspiracy. But Marcus called with better news. Victoria embezzled $2.3 million in HOA funds to buy her ranch. In this state, that's a felony. Now I had her on fraud and water. The twist: Sarah, the reporter, discovered that Victoria's ranch, supposedly a cattle operation, was a cover for a synthetic drug lab. The DEA had been watching for months but couldn't get close. My land, the high ground, gave the only line of sight into her operation, and the water system was the last piece of the puzzle. Suddenly, I wasn't just fighting a crooked HOA, I was sitting on the lever for a federal drug bust. Agent Rebecca Martinez from the DEA arrived with a plan at exactly 10 a.m. The next morning, I would shut off all water to the ranch. With no water, their labs would overheat, their chemicals would spoil, and the operation would fall apart. I'd stay hidden in the stone-walled valve chamber guarded by 30 federal agents while Martinez's team moved in. When the moment came, I thought of Mom, of all the nights I sat by her grave, of all the stories she told me about standing up for what's right, and I closed the valve. In 2 hours, the ranch was chaos. Trucks and hazmat suits, Victoria barking orders, then making a desperate call to Mexico. That's when the DEA stormed in. Helicopters, SWAT, the whole 9 yards. Justice didn't just arrive, it landed on her like a freight train. Victoria was arrested right above the spot where my house had stood. As they took her away, she looked at the valve chamber at me and mouthed, "Why, I knew she'd never understand. Some things are worth fighting for, and some people only find their strength when they lose everything." In the aftermath, the town rebuilt. Pete supervised the new kitchen. Marcus helped start a community foundation with the federal reward money. Sarah won a Pulitzer for her reporting, and even Victoria, serving 12 years in federal prison, wrote me a letter apologizing for everything and donated to our foundation. Life went on, but I made sure the water kept flowing for everyone who needed it the way my family always intended. So yeah, my house got crushed, but I ended up protecting something a lot bigger, a community, a legacy, and maybe even a few futures that hadn't been written yet. Sometimes the smallest person holds all the power. Now let me ask you, have you ever had to fight for something precious when the odds were stacked against you? Share your story in the comments, because you never know who might need a little inspiration to stand up and do what's right. If this story struck a nerve, hit like, subscribe, and pass it along to someone who needs to hear it, because justice, even when it takes the long road, always finds its way home.